Hi there. I'm Bill Peterson, and I designed the Squishbox, a MIDI sound module powered by a Raspberry Pi that runs Fluid Synth. Fluid Synth is a free software program that uses soundfonts, which are also a free sound file format to produce musical sound. So basically, you can plug a USB capable MIDI controller like this keyboard into the Squishbox, and it will play sounds for you. So, I have a few patches on here. This got a piano sound, and then some drums up there. Another pad. Got some keyboard sounds there. There's sort of a guitar sound, right? So there's a few patches on there. But the point of it is that it is an inexpensive way to get sounds out of a keyboard or MIDI controller without having to have like a laptop, an audio interface, and audio workstation software all set up. You just plug it in, plug in your keyboard, plug in an amp or headphones, and you're good to go. It's also, like I said, inexpensive because it's a Raspberry Pi and it uses open software, and it is modifiable. So you can add patches, you can add sounds from wherever you want. Sound fonts are something you can modify and make on your own. So the point is it's modifiable. If you want to know more about the Squishbox, you can check out the link or links in the video description. But I'm doing this video because a user emailed me asking if I could go over the procedure for modifying and adding sounds and patches to the Squishbox. The patches on the Squishbox are stored in bank files which are in the YAML format. YAML stands for Yet Another Markup Language, but it is basically just a plain text, human-readable file format that defines data structures. So it's supposed to be easy to modify, but if you don't know what data structure the Squishbox is expecting, it could be confusing to try to mess with the patches. So let's talk about it. First, I think it'll help a little bit just to look at sound fonts and presets and talk about how they are different from patches in the Squishbox. So I'm going to go ahead and open a sound font using Polyphony, which is a free sound font editor. So I'm going to open fluid r3_gm.sf2. This is the default sound font that comes with Fluid Synth. And let's look at the presets in here. So these are basically the sounds you can choose in this sound font file. So we got a piano there. That's what you heard. There's that electric piano. There's some other sounds too. Jazz guitar, sure. There's even percussion sounds if you go down here. So this has a lot of presets in it because it's meant to be like a default sound font that can fulfill a lot of different uses. So a preset in a sound font file has a bank, right, which is this first number, and a program, right? So within each bank there can be a bunch of programs, and there are multiple banks in this file. So this was all bank 0. Here's bank 8 starting now. They don't have to be inclusive. Here's all the way 128. Those are all the percussion sounds. So that's what presets are. Now patches in the Squishbox, each patch defines the presets that are supposed to be played, and it also says which MIDI channels will trigger those presets. So when you play a note on a MIDI controller, it sends the number of that note, but it also sends what channel that note should be played on. So, and that channel can generally be from MIDI channels 1 through 16. And usually a keyboard by default is going to play on MIDI channel 1, but you can change that in your controller, and that'll be in your instruction manual or something. For example, this first patch here plays that piano sound on channel 1, and the pads send notes on channel 10, and the patch is set for channel 10 to be the drum sound. Right? So okay, so that's sort of the difference between presets in sound font files and patches in the Squishbox. And the other thing patches can do is they can have MIDI routing commands. So you could do things like you could transpose notes. So when you play C, it might actually produce a G note out of the Squishbox. So that could be useful. You can also do things like some keyboards will allow you to split the keyboard, where like the top half might play channel 1, the bottom half might play channel 2 or 7 or whatever. So you could play different instruments that way, but you could also use MIDI routing commands to route, say, the keys from C up to channel 1 and the keys below C to channel 2, and that way you could sort of create a split without your keyboard being able to do it. MIDI routing also allows you to route control change messages from like the knobs and things moving on your controller to different functions. Like this one I've routed to volume, for example, so that allows me to control the volume of the sound that I'm playing. So that's what patches do. So let's look at an actual bank file and see how you change a patch and then how you add a sound to the Squishbox. Now, to edit these files, you have to actually connect to the Squishbox in some way to edit them. So if you built one of these from the plans that I've provided online, I'll assume that you have figured out how to connect it to your network and you know how to SSH or FTP to the Squishbox. But if you built one, if you bought a pre-made one, then by default it connects to a hotspot called the Squishbox hotspot with the password FluidSynth. So you have to create that for it to connect to. So one way or another, you have to get onto the Squishbox via Wi-Fi and be able to edit those patches. So I'll leave the subject of that for either another video, or you can check the online documentation to see how to make those connections. But for now, let's just go. I'm going to open a web browser, and I open up the web configuration panel for my Squishbox. So I'm going to type in the IP of my Squishbox, which I just know from earlier. Let's tab down to it here. And there we go. So when you open the web configuration panel, it opens the default bank file for editing. So this is what the bank files look like. So this is YAML. It's a little messy because I've tried to add comments in here to explain how the file format works to someone who doesn't want to watch this video, I suppose. So comments are lines that begin with a £, or you can actually have an inline comment, so anything after a £sign is a comment and doesn't do anything. So like I said, what YAML does is it just defines data structures. So those can be in a couple different forms. They can be lists. So like here's a list where each element is preceded by a dash, right? And so then the contents of each element are these. In this case, this thing's in curly brace, but they could be just a number or text or even another list, or so you can nest things in YAML too. So the way you nest things is by indenting. So here is a list element that has multiple things inside it. So you can have lists where basically just things are listed in order, but you can also have mappings or dictionaries or arrays. And what that is basically a list of key value pairs, right? So the key here is a key type, and the value of the type is CC. It's a control change. So and then channel, the value of channel is actually an entire list. So this is another way you can show lists in YAML, is rather than having each element be on its own line with a dash, you can show them inline. You can enclose them in square brackets, right? Mappings also can be shown inline. So here's a mapping that's inline, right? So here's a mapping that's on separate lines. So each element has its own line with a name and value. But then you can also show them all on one line if you enclose them in curly braces. So then you have name, value, and then comma, next name, next element name, next element value, which the value happens to be a whole list here. Right? So that's kind of basically how YAML works. So it has lists, or it has mappings, and it uses dashes to show lists, and it also uses indentation to show scope, right? And so it can be a little confusing because sometimes in this file I have shown elements in line just to show the different format that you can do that. And also maybe just to make things a little more compact, right? So if you put every single element on a second line, it might be like a little hard to read. So I'm not sure if that's good or bad the way I've done it, but hopefully people can figure it out. So the format of the bank files is they have a number of variables that can be at the global scope, and a lot of variables are optional. So like here I have some key values defining things about the effects unit. So this is setting the reverb level, this is setting the reverb room size, but you don't have to have these. This is a variable is setting the loudness of the Squishbox, basically the bass gain, and that can be any number, but numbers between 0 and 1 work best because otherwise it will distort the sound. This variable, this soundfonts variable, is basically its contents should be a mapping where each element of the mapping is a shortcut name and then a path to a sound font that you want to use. So you don't have to have this. It's just convenience for when you're defining your patches below. You can use this as a shortcut rather than putting this whole file in to talk about which sound font you want to use. All right, so let me scroll down. So each of these are name value pairs. So here is an important name value pair. The name of this element of the mapping in this bank file is patches. So this is where all the patches are. So the contents of this element, as you can see, is a list. So here's the first element of this list preceded by that dash, right? So this entire thing I've highlighted is one element, is one entire patch, right? So the contents of this patch is a mapping, right? And so here's the first element of that mapping, although they don't really have an order. They're just their name value pair. So this is giving the name of the patch that will show up on the screen when you select the patch. So jazz combo. So that's that first patch. It's the piano sound that we were hearing earlier. So these other things here are defining the presets they're defining the sound font and the preset within that sound font that will play on that MIDI channel. So in the MIDI specification, MIDI channels are numbered 1 through 16, but the developers of Fluid Synth decided to index the channels from 0. So channel 0 actually corresponds to MIDI channel 1. So that's a little confusing, but it's just the way Fluid Synth is designed. The contents of this element of this patch, this element named 0, you need to say the sound font. So that's Fluid GM. So that refers to this shortcut up above that I mentioned earlier. So it says use this sound font file that we saw, which is sitting on the Squishbox, or a copy of it rather. And so it says use from this sound font and from bank 0 within that sound font, program 0 should be played whenever notes come in on MIDI channel 1, right? On MIDI channel 2, I've assigned also from that sound font from bank 0 program 33, and that's actually a bass sound. If I go to program 33 here in bank 0, that's a bass sound. So if I could play notes on MIDI channel 2 on my keyboard here, like if I change some settings, then you would hear that bass sound. And then on channel 10, I've added from bank 128 program 0, and that's that drum set sound that you heard earlier. So that's why you can hear the drum set on the pads. So because the pads send MIDI channel 10, so the patch says when you get MIDI channel 10, play preset 0 from bank 128 in the Fluid Synth sound font. So that's how you set patches for sounds. So you can also have router rules within a patch, as I talked about earlier, but that's probably a little more complicated than we can talk about now. I think if one understands how the presets are assigned within a patch, that would make it easier to understand router rules. So I think this is a better place to start. So let's look at how we would add a patch to the Squishbox, to this bank in the Squishbox, just by editing this file. So okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to copy this patch, and actually I'm just going to copy this part because everything below that is router rule stuff, and I don't really need that necessarily. So I'm copying that, and I'm going to paste it just above there, right? And I'm just going to leave this white space here. It doesn't hurt anything, and it'll kind of let me see what I'm working on. So I'm going to give it a new name. I'll just call it I'll just call it my new patch. And say I want to be able to play a different sound out of the Squishbox. So say I want like a xylophone sound. So I'll look here, and I've got here's a xylophone sound in the Fluid Synth sound font. Okay, not bad, I guess. So what program was that? That was Bank 0 program 13. So I'll just change that setting. And cool. So that should now give me a new patch. So if I save that, right? Now if I go to the Squishbox, I need to actually reload that bank into memory. So I can do that by switching to it. If I hold the left button, I can get into the settings menu and then hold right for 2 seconds to say switch bank. And then I'll just so I can scroll through my available banks. There's just 2 on here, I guess. And I can hold right to select. Oh, whoops, that's not the one I want. I was modifying bank 0. So let me just go back. So switch bank. And okay, select bank 0. All right, so I'm basically reloading the bank that I just edited. So now you can see that there are 7 patches instead of 6 because we added one, right? So it was the second patch in the list, and there it is now, my new patch. And there it is. Now we can hear that xylophone sound. So that's basically how you can add new sounds to the Squishbox. How you can add patches. So suppose you want to add a patch from a different sound font file. So yeah, maybe the Fluid Synth sound fonts are just not good enough for you. So what you could do is, first of all, you need to get a sound font. So you could go somewhere like polyphonysoundfonts.com. So they make that sound font editor, but they also have a lot of freely available sound fonts on their website. Maybe I want a cool synthesizer sound, so I'll go there, and there's this various synth sounds here, right? And if I click on that, it looks like it has quite a few presets in it, so I could go and download it there. I've already done that, actually. It's in my downloads folder here. There we go, various synths. Let's open that up in Fluid Synth and look at it. And there they are. There are all those sounds. So let's hear some of them. Cool. Rollin' New Age. What's that sound like? Okay. Yeah, they sound pretty legit. So say I want to get some of those sounds onto the Squishbox so I can play them. First, I need to get this file onto the Squishbox. So like I said, if you built this yourself from the plans I provided, you probably know how to FTP files on there. So you just need to send them to the home directory of the Pi. But you can also use this control panel here. There is if you go to Files, there's a file manager here, and you can choose that file and upload it, right? So I've already done that, actually. So if I go back to this bank file, if I want to use one of the sounds from that file to create a new patch, that uses one of those sounds, I can just now start a new patch. So I'll just make a dash to say, okay, there's another element of this patches mapping now. So that's going to mean a new patch, right? And let's give it a name. We will call it Funky Synth, I guess, right? Okay. And I'm going to say on MIDI channel 1, which has to be indexed as 0, I gotta give it a, let's see, I gotta give it a sound font, a program, and a bank, right? So I could do it in this inline style like this, but I'm gonna just do indenting. I'm gonna have it be like the most open, easy to read format. I can't, maybe I should have just done this the whole time. I shouldn't use all these crazy inline formats. So we want sound font. What was the name of it again? Various synths. Let's see. Okay, and I just undid what no, it's still there. Okay. Various synths.sf2. Is that right? Oh, it's not capitalized. Okay, back up. Fix that. Okay. and the bank. So this is channel 1 from this sound font, and we want, which one did I like? I like this, I like that Space Sweep one. So it looks like that's bank 1, program 0. So that's kind of weird. They incremented the banks and not the programs, or some of them they did. Huh. Unusual. Okay, whatever. You know, doesn't matter. You can do it how you want. So let's see, bank 1, program 0. So bank 1, program 0. Right, so that should do it. So I'm going to save that. So I've saved that bank. So I'll go back to the Squishbox here, and now again I need to reload the bank in order for that patch to be there. So hold down left for 2 to get to the settings menu, hold down right for 2 to select switch bank, and I'm just going to select bank 0 again to reload it. So it's loading patches. Now it says 1 of 8, right? So there's the xylophone I added earlier. Here's my funky synth. Cool. So that's how you can add new sounds and patches to the Squishbox. So before I go, there is actually a way that you can add patches without having to get into some kind of web configuration tool or do some kind of SSH stuff. You can actually add patches just using the buttons on the Squishbox itself. So what you can do is you can actually browse through the presets on soundfonts and then add one of those presets as a separate patch. So let me show you how that works. So if we hold left to go to the settings menu, then we want to go to the advanced option, and we're going to open sound font, right? So now we can scroll through and see the different sound fonts we have available. So let's say, so where's that one? There, yeah, various synths. So say I want to look at some of the other sounds in this file. So if I open a sound font in this way, I'm now in a sort of sound font browsing mode. Now when I tap, I'm going to browse through the presets in that sound font, right? So in this way, I can sort of preview. I can preview all the different sounds in a sound font, and you could even play this way. You could just set it up so that a sound font loads when you start the Squishbox, and you could just tap through the presets in that sound font. But say you have some patch file you like, and then you find a sound font preset that you want to add as a patch. Well, if you hold right when you're in the patch mode, it opens a little patch edit menu that you can use to rename the patch or update or delete it. If you're in sound font mode, it opens a little sound font menu where you have the choices to either just exit the sound font mode and go back to patch mode, or you can save this sound font preset as a new patch. Right? So it's done that. So now we could keep browsing, but if you go back, if you exit sound font, it will take you back to regular patch mode. Now you see there's 9 patches now because we've added one. So if I go all the way to the end, it's added that preset as this Regal synth patch. So this is a way that you could add sounds to the Squishbox without having to do a bunch of manual text editing kind of stuff. The one drawback about it is that it will always add the preset on MIDI channel 1, and you can't add any routing commands. You have to do that stuff manually. That is sort of a somewhat medium-length tutorial about how you can modify the bank files on the Squishbox or add some new sounds. So I hope it's been helpful, and thank you for watching.